All right, guys. You guys made it to week 2. Congratulations there. Hope you guys enjoy the challenges from the weekend. You guys had a bunch of them. Yeah, hopefully you were able to complete those. I'm going to be doing one of those on screen just to see how a solution might look like. The one I decided to go with was balanced parentheses. I don't know if you guys all tackled that one, but I thought it was an interesting problem. So let's go through it together. Let me share my screen here. All right, hopefully you guys can see my screen there. There we go. All right, so balanced parentheses. Pretty simple description here, but definitely wasn't the easiest of problems. So here we have our task is to write an algorithm that takes in a string and returns a string with balanced parentheses only. So there's a bunch of examples here. We know that our string is going to only have letters, numbers, and parentheses, so we don't have to worry about other items. But yeah, so there's a bunch of test cases here just to go over them. Like the second one here has an extra ending parentheses, so the output should drop that ending parentheses. Yeah, a bunch of examples here. In this case, there's no content we need to return because we have a closing parentheses before a opening one, and then an opening one that's not matched by a closing one. So that should return an empty string. But yeah, so we have a bunch of test cases that we can test with, and then as an additional challenge, we do nested parentheses. So let me get to my coding window, and let's check this out. All right, so first thing I will do, as always, I'm going to fork. I need to delete my fork. All right, sorry about that. Let me restart. All right, so we have balanced parentheses from the 6 challenges you guys had. As always, I'm going to fork first. So select my personal GitHub. Let's do it to magic. All right, once I've forked, I want to copy my GitHub URL, then go to my command line and do a checkout. So do git clone, paste in the URL, copy that over, clear, and then hit code period to open up a new VS Studio. And there we are. All right, there we are. All right, so we have 2 languages we got to do this in. I'm going to choose Python since we're learning mostly Python this week. So let's get that started off. The first thing we're going to do is read the spec to see what challenge or testing they have. I could convert this to unit tests if I wanted to, but for now, I'm just going to go with these test cases, since that's what they presented. We have a challenging test case also. So, all right, I think I know what my job is. Let's see if we could code this up. So the first thing, as always, I like to do just kind of have a game plan. Again, just good to know what I need to tackle before I actually start implementing anything. So I'm just gonna write some comments in here. I think the first thing is just talk about my inputs. My input is a string with friends, letters, and numbers. So that's from the requirements doc. I need to return a string that has balanced friends. And then obviously the hardest part will be in the middle here is go through my input string and remove unbalanced. Right. All right, so I guess this is a high-level overview, pretty simple. It sounds like 3 steps, but it's going to be a little more difficult than that. Mostly, I want to figure out how to go through my string. So to, I guess, get into more detail here, let's think about balanced parentheses. So basically for every opening parentheses in my string, I need a closing parentheses. So that's one of the requirements, but also there's ordering involved. I can't just have a bunch of closing parentheses first and then match those with opening parentheses. That wouldn't make sense in our context. So let's see. For every opening parentheses, so a couple cases here. If we encounter a closing parens that doesn't have opening. All right, so this case is if we encounter a closing parentheses, but we know there's no opening parentheses ahead of it, then we know we can just ignore it because it's not balanced. It's definitely not going to be balanced since there's nothing to match it. And then the other case would be if we have an opening parens, but no eventual closing parens. So this one's a little more involved, as in we're going to encounter a bunch of opening parentheses, but we don't know right off the bat if there's closing parentheses that match up with it. So that's going to be a little more to do there. But all right, so I think that's my basic logic there for ignoring closing parentheses that don't have matching opening parentheses, and vice versa, ignoring opening parentheses that don't have closing parentheses. All right, so I think that's my initial game plan. Again, I might need to add more steps, but hopefully I have a good overview of what I need to do. So yeah, I'm going to start coding now. All right, so we have our input string. I guess there's nothing we really need to do there. But I feel like I'm probably going to return a new string. As we talked about last week, strings are immutable, so I can't really just keep updating my input string, and I might not want to. Like, I might want to keep that as is. So I'm going to just create a new string. I'm going to call it balance string or str, and that's going to start off as empty. And all right, let's start with that. I feel like I'm going to have to go through every character in the string. I don't think there's any magic way to kind of just look for parentheses. So let's go with that. I'm going to write a for loop. Let's do I. I'm going to use the enumerate functionality of string. Let's see if this works as I expect it to. Let's do that. Print out I, sure. And at the very end, I'm going to need to return my balanced string. So just make sure that my enumerate for loop will work correctly. Basically, I want to go through every character. Let's just double check that. Python. Let's have a quick test case here. So yeah, I don't like running my test spec right away. I just want to code up my solution and have my own test case before I get to the more harder test cases. So in this case, let's just do a simple A, B, C. All right, so I'm just printing out in this loop each character. On balance friends.py. All right, got an error. Balance friends is not defined. Balance. Typos always get me. All right, so just running my function, nothing fancy going on here. I'm printing out the index that I'm looping over and the character at the index. So I've got an A, parentheses, B, parentheses, and C, which is what my input was. I'm not sure where this, okay. It's wrapping around. Okay, cool. So it seems to be doing what I want, so I'm just going to proceed. Let's actually add some logic in here. So I'm going to delete my print statement, and let's see. So I want to keep track of all my opening parentheses because I need to figure out if there's a matching closing parentheses eventually. So at this point, I feel like I might need another data structure. Again, there's many ways that might be possible to solve this, but I'm going to have a list here. List opening parens list, and let's make that a list as you expect. So I usually like naming my variables with descriptive names, like, I want to make sure that this is a list, so when I'm coding with it, I know I'm actually working with the list. I use str for strings. Again, when you have a lot of variables, you get to kind of have that naming convention going for yourself so that you know what you're dealing with in your program. All right, so let's see. I'm going to ignore my steps down there for now. All right, so if my character, which I call char, and again, just go over this enumerate function. This produces an index and the value at that index when you use enumerate. So it's a good handy function in Python. So if my character equals an opening parentheses, I want to append it to my list. So let's add some better comments here so we know what we're doing. If you get opening parens, add it to our list. Simple enough. Then if we encounter, I guess, the opposite, if we encounter the closing parentheses, we got to actually do a little bit more. So as we talked about in our first condition, if we have a closing parentheses, but not an opening one already, then we could just drop it right away because there's nothing that's going to match it. Like you can't close a parentheses before opening. That wouldn't make sense in our context. So in this case, I'm actually going to investigate the length of my opening parentheses list. So if I do something like len, again, len is just a function in Python to get the length of a container. I'm going to check my open parentheses list. All right. And then if that is equal to 0, which means it's empty, then I could ignore this. So I'm going to hit a continue here, and I'll explain this continue in a bit. And then finally, let's have our balance string. All right, so generally my logic here is to go through every character in the string, and based on what it is, whether it's an opening parentheses, closing parentheses, or neither, and then append it to my balance string based on some conditions. So in my first condition, if I get an opening parentheses, I'm going to append it to my, actually I need to make a change here. So instead of saving my char, I want to save the index that it's going to go into. So I might need some changes here still, but objectively my goal here is to store opening parentheses and matching closing parentheses and any other character, which are the data of our string, like letters and numbers. So let's add more comments here. If no opening parens, ignore. All right, so in this case, I just want to ignore it. So that's why I'm continuing instead of appending it to my balance string. Sorry, let me adjust this quickly. Make this a bit smaller. All right, but if there isn't matching opening parens, I want to actually get rid of it. All right, so .pop is a function that will remove the last item in my list. So again, my algorithm here is adding the index for where the opening parentheses is, but if I find a matching closing parens, I'm just gonna get rid of that index. Basically, I don't need to track it anymore because it's been matched, but I still added it to my balance string here. All right, and then append the character. So at this point, I don't want to get too into it. I kind of want to just check where I'm at. So I might run this program and see what happens. But basically, in this case, my balance string will get a lot of values in it. And I want to print it out. So let's print it out outside my for loop here before I return print balance string. Now let's see what happens. Hopefully I don't have any typos, but it's quite possible. Let's run that again. Yep, syntax errors abound. I always forget my colons here. I got them. More. Right. All right. I think I got all my colons properly assigned. Always seem to get those. All right, cool. So I ran this and it outputted my string, but in this case, my string wasn't really a good test case. It's already balanced, so there's not much going on. Let me add maybe a couple extra closing parentheses and see what happens. So I'm gonna save that, run that again. All right, so I added a couple of parentheses to my input, closing parentheses that are unmatched, and my output was correct. So far, so good. But obviously there's probably more to do. I haven't handled my second case of if we have extra opening parentheses. So let's take a look at what happens if we have extra opening parentheses. So I'm gonna add a bunch, I guess, after the A. And yeah, so we have, in this case, these three are unmatched. You guys can see that. So ideally, my algorithm should ignore these, but at this point I'm not. So if I ran my algorithm, yep. So I'm still not handling that case correctly. So let's think about this. So I was tracking my opening parentheses, so I know I have extra ones. So I think something I could do here is I have my for loop. I'm ignoring, let me get rid of some white space here. If I have a bunch of opening parentheses left because I did not pop them off due to not finding a match, then I know I have extra opening parentheses. So let's pull that out of the for loop and say something like if len of opening parens list is greater than 0, then we're gonna do some extra logic. And just remember my colon there because I always forget it. All right, so let's think about this. I'm populating my balance string with opening parentheses regardless. Yeah, that's what I have coded up here. I need to figure out a way to get those opening parentheses out if there's no matches for them after we went through our entire string. So let's think about that. So let's see. Maybe I will start going through my string again. Just gonna copy this. All right, so I'm gonna loop through my balance string this time. And actually, no, I have a better idea. So in this case, I'm kind of trying some things there, so I might need a refactor. I'm appending my original index, that's what the I value here is, into my parens list. So I want to use my original string and go through that string again because the indices in my opening parens list match that. They do not necessarily match my balance string because I might have had extra closing parentheses that I ignored with this continue. So this continue, if you guys are familiar with that, in a for loop, we'll just say go to the next iteration automatically. It won't continue executing. And that is what we want to do here because we had unmatched closing parentheses. So we just want to ignore it and go to the next character in this case. So considering that I'm storing my original index from my original string, I want to use my original string, loop over that. And I think I'm going to have an if condition that says if I in opening parens list, let's do a not. So this is that not logical operator that we talked about as for Python. Remember my colon here. I want to, all right, I might need a new string here. All right, so I think this might not work as I want it to, so I'm gonna have to make some changes. So let's actually make this a new value. Okay, so I'm gonna need some comments here because I'm doing something that's not clear. I'm gonna store the next index of my opening parens. So I guess when I say next, I do mean index. So basically I take the length of my balance string, which is gonna be the next index, which I push down here. So when I add a character, that index is gonna be the actual length. And so currently the last index of my string is length -1, right? Because we start 0 base. But because I know I'm gonna be pushing this later, I'm just gonna use the length of the string to be my next index. The reason I made this change is so that I could actually loop over my balance string since that's actually the data that I care about. And then here, I'm checking if I have extra opening parentheses left over, I want to ignore them now. So this check is basically saying if your index is not found in the parens list, then add it to our actually balanced string. So in this case, I'm going to create a new value. I feel like I'm kind of creating too many variables here, but I want this to work. Let's create a new balanced string official. Hopefully that's not too confusing. That's going to be an empty string, and I'm going to start populating this string with my characters from my original list. So let's check. Hopefully I didn't lose you guys there. So basically, the first part of my logic is doing two things. It's ignoring any closing parentheses that don't have a match with opening parentheses, and then also appending every opening parentheses and every other character to my balance string variable. Then, after I'm done with my for loop, I want to check if I have any extra opening parentheses left over. Because if they didn't get popped off, that means that they don't have any matches. So in this case, if I do have that case, I want to go through my balance string, which again have potentially extra opening parentheses, and then ignore the indices that are still left in that opening parentheses list. So in that case, if the I value is not in my opening parentheses list, I want to append it to my balance string official, which I guess official in this case means getting rid of extra items. So let's actually change this a bit. If that's there. Okay, so I'm calling this official now. And official. Okay, so what I'm doing here, I have two cases. First case, I have extra. If we have extra opening, unmatched opening parens, ignore them. But the second case here is if I didn't have any extras, then I could just continue with my balance string. So just to make it easier, I'm going to reassign it to my official value. Instead, I could easily just return my balance string here, but I want to just have one return point, which is going to be at the bottom of my function. So or if we have no extra opening parens, return copy balance. All right, so it's adding comments to make sure if I ever go over this again, I understand it. Always good to be descriptive about what you're doing, especially when it's not obvious. All right, so get rid of this. All right, so I think I have something that might work, but obviously I need to test this. So let's just review my code from top to bottom. I have a balance string, which is going to be keeping track of, I guess, some filtered characters from my original string. Opening parens list is actually an active container. We're gonna add to it every time we get an opening parentheses, and then we're gonna actually remove an opening parentheses index when we encounter a matching closed one. So that's what this is tracking. Basically, it's basically, again, building up every time it finds an opening one, and then building down every time it finds a closing one. However, we have a case here is if that is empty and we get a closing one, then we ignore the closing parentheses. So that takes care of the extra closing parentheses. And then after we finish the initial for loop, we do something extra. If we have extra opening parentheses, we go through the string again and drop all the extra opening parentheses via this line. So let's add a comment here. Add all characters that are not in the All right, so I think I've named some stuff poorly here, so I'm actually going to update it. So I'm going to call this index. It's actually storing indices, not got a bunch of these. All right, so make sure I get all of those and a couple more here. All right, cool. So think that should work, but obviously we should test because that's what testing is all about. Let's test my original thing here. Hopefully I don't have typos, but I can never trust myself. All right, cool. So that actually seemed to work. I have a bunch of extra opening parentheses here, and those seem to have gotten dropped. So far it looks pretty good. Let's try a little bit more complicated example. Let's add a bunch of extraneous like extraneous closing parentheses. So like that. Let's add some to the beginning. That's a test case we didn't test, like some beginning ones that are unmatched. Maybe add some that do match here. All right. So I don't know how many extra ones there are here, but there's a bunch of extra ones. There's some beginning ones that aren't closed. Let me add a couple here. So if I wanted to highlight the ones that are matched, like these two are matched, these three are probably matched at some point, but let's just see what the output is. Type it. All right, so I have an output. I can manually check it. So in this case, I have opening, close. I'm good there. I have 3 opening here, so I'm just going to keep that in mind, 3. I have a closing one, so I can bring that down to 2. I have another closing one, bring that down to 1. Another closing one, that's 0. And then I can see these two are easily matched. So, mentally I did it. I have 0. The output string here looks legit. So that looks promising. So I think at this point, I'm ready to submit it to my test cases in my spec file. So let's fill that up. Basically, instead of running my test file, I'm going to get rid of some extra print statements because I don't want that to be my output when I test. So get rid of this and get rid of, just comment this out. Right, so let's go to my spec file. Y, call that spec underscore. All right, let's cross our fingers, give this a run. All right, I see a bunch of trues here. That looks promising. All right, I think I'm pretty good with this. So one thing I want to do, just to go over it, I want to actually convert these to unit tests, just to get familiar with that process. So if we remember the steps for that, the first thing I need to do for Python is import unit tests. Next thing, there's this main thing I need to do that will again, this is just get in the habit of using the unit test framework. I already know that these work, but I might want to add new tests and kind of just see how unit tests work. So in this case, I think I need to do unit test. I believe that's how I get kicked off. And then let's actually convert this. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's actually going to lead into our lecture for today, which is about classes. So you guys might have seen this class keyword that we use for our unit test framework. If you guys are unfamiliar with it, don't worry. We're going to clear that up today. Let's call these test cases. And test cases. And then we get to add this. And again, if you're not familiar with what this is doing, this is basically inheriting properties from this test case framework or class that is coming from unit tests. So in that case, our class inherits like all the functions and properties from the test case base class. Check that out. All right, so we got to add some tests here. Test simple. Just adding some descriptions here. Simple test case, which all right, that'll be my first test case. And let's see here. All right, so I'm going to need a self course. Cannot type. And then let's do an assert equals self assert. All right, so in this case, my balance parens, and I need to run that. So again, let's use our simple test case that we had before, which was A parentheses B, C, and then an extra closing parentheses. And I would want that to equal, that'd be A, B, and C. So no closing parentheses at the end. It's kind of confusing when you have actual parentheses around here, but hopefully that's easy enough to read. Let me comment out these test cases. And, all right, so I have my unit test.main and this little if statement here. I have one test case here. Let's run that and just see what happens. I might have an error here, but let's see. Pull this out, run my spec again. All right, so I ran one test. I got one dot here. Kind of hard to see, but I got an OK, so I think I passed my simple test case that I created. If you guys remember from last week, we have something called green, so I'm going to install that. Just add some coloring to my test line. That's a pretty small program, but instead of running Python, I could just run green and run my Python file. So what is it? Balanced spec.py. All right, so I ran it. I got a little green dot here. Hopefully you guys can see it down here. So that was just one test case I passed, but that's just the process of basically converting simple print statements into actual unit tests. They're a little more robust and can offer a little bit more. Let me add one more test case here to make sure that let's go make it a little complex here. So one of our challenges or additional challenges was nested parentheses. And I think our algorithm hopefully should take care of those. Let's have that. Let's have some extra starting parentheses, some extra closing parentheses. Let's do a bunch of nesting. Where are the duplicate C's? All right, so that's a bunch of nested parentheses. Hopefully that'll clean it up, but I need to know what the output is. So let's do some mental check there quickly. I need to drop my beginning ones for sure. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opening, 6 opening. Then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 closing. So I think I need to chop these off. This one's extra, and then these are off. So I think my output should be that if I did my mental check correctly. But okay, so let's give that a run. Let's see if my test case actually works. All right, I got another green dot. Makes me feel good about myself. Yeah, so that's, again, the process of creating unit tests. Pretty simple. In Python, you got to import unit test, then create a class. And again, if you're not familiar with classes, hopefully after our lecture today, you guys will be class experts. We have some test cases here. We had to start with test underscore just to make sure our unit tests know that those are test cases. Have a description and comments, and then have our self asserts equal. Again, the asserts equals is something that's inherited from unit test.test case. So it's not like a magic function coming out of nowhere. That's being inherited from our test case framework. And yeah, that was balanced parentheses. Hopefully you guys were able to follow along. Hopefully you guys attempted it over the weekend and were able to get it working. Obviously we have JavaScript here. We could do that, but the algorithm for the most part will be the same. The only difference would be we'd be using a different test framework. We'd be using Jest instead of unit tests. All right. Hopefully that was clear enough for you guys. I think, yeah, let's take a short break before we dive into our main part of our lecture. But let's take a, let's say 8-minute break. So get back at 9:25 and we'll get into our lecture for today.